spread of the coronavirus in the United States, you have had moments of clarity, had moments where people begrudgingly admit that their erstwhile adversaries are doing everything they can. One such moment came yesterday from Fredo's brother, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who had this to say about his working relationship with President Trump and his administration and the quality of the support that he's getting per what he's asking.
We can't build new hospitals in 45 days. The federal government can be extremely helpful here, and we need the federal government's help. I had a conversation with the president yesterday. It was an open and honest conversation. We've always had a very good dialogue. Even when we don't agree, we've always had a very good dialogue. But the president and I agreed yesterday, look, we're fighting the same war, and this is a war, and we're in the same trench. And I have your back, you have my back, and we're going to do everything we can for the people of the state of New York. And the president agreed to that, and I agreed to that, and his actions demonstrate that he is doing that. I've had a number of conversations with White House staff who are working on this. I had a conversation with the Secretary of the Army. The President sent the Army Corps of Engineers here this afternoon. I'll be meeting with them this afternoon. I spoke to the President this morning about specific actions the President is going to take. I can tell you he is fully engaged on trying to help New York. He's being very creative and very energetic, and I thank him for his partnership.
Well, add that to Gavin Newsom the other week, add that to Dana Bash after the president's briefing on Tuesday. Some begrudging respect being offered in the direction of not just the president, but of course the entire response team and the professionals that are guiding it through their expertise, like Doctors Fauci and Birx. Seems to me that's a much more productive approach to trying to address this public health crisis and economic health crisis than, say, the approach that our despicable, and I do mean despicable, I mean that word despicable, governor and mayor in this state are the approach that they're taking, which we'll hear more from both of those goofballs today, which will be undoubtedly more of the blame game since that's their stock and trade. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined again by Andrew Klavan, famed Hollywood screenwriter, also podcaster, Another Kingdom, its final season, season 3, now available. And again, a Hollywood screenwriter. He was the writer of the Gosnell movie, if you recall, Gosnell, the trial of America's biggest serial killer. Andrew Klavan, thanks for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Always good to be here, Dan. Thanks.
So, it seems that some of the partisan sniping has been tamped down when you've got big state governors like Cuomo and Newsom trying to be constructive, when you had Mitch McConnell, whether you agree with it or not, trying to be constructive and saying, even though we have qualms about what the House sent us, we're going to pass that aid package and then we're going to do more. People trying to, focus their attention where it belongs, which is on addressing all of the textural issues related to this pandemic.
Yeah, and an emergency character comes out, personality comes out. One really interesting thing that everybody should remember is that for so long, we've been hearing what a fascist and an authoritarian Donald Trump is. I remember Danny Deutsch on MSNBC saying that he would just wait for an emergency and use it like Hitler used the Reichstag fire to take emergency powers. And instead, you see Donald Trump with total respect for the states, keeping federalism intact. He hasn't made any authoritarian moves. Every single one of those guys, from Rick Wilson, who yesterday tweeted that Melania Trump should get infected, every single one of those guys should be barred from commentary by the people who have employed them. And members of the press, I have to say, some of the members of the press who have shown themselves in this emergency to be just trash. I mean, the people who are continually focusing on whether we call this the Chinese virus or the Wu flu or whatever we call it, is that really what we need to know at this moment? I mean, people are really afraid. People are really sick. People are really suffering economically. And these guys are asking about some pet little peeve they think they have, some gotcha thing that they think they have on this president that absolutely 0% of the population cares about. they should just be removed from their jobs. I mean, these are people who are not helping the Republic. They're not helping the news business. They're just covering themselves in shame. And so we do see character come out in these incidents.
And never Trumper Rick Wilson, the hack political consultant you just referenced. For those who forgot, he is the creator of the phrase "credulous boomer rubes" to talk about Trump supporters too. But he's a fan favorite of Don Lemon and the CNN crew. Just to your point too, Andrew, about America's Hitler, that would be Trump, of course. He closed borders in this order: China, Europe, Canada, possibly maybe sometime Mexico.
I keep remembering that old commercial, "Where's the beef?" And I keep watching him going, "Where's the fascism?" What happened to our blossoming Hitler, and how come he's not seizing this opportunity to take power? It really is. So many things come out. One of the things that I keep hearing, like in the New York Times and other leftist venues, is, "Oh, look, we need big government now. We should have big government all the time." And this is that "don't let a crisis go to waste" mentality that Rahm Emanuel talked about. Can we use this crisis to extend the reach of government? Nancy Pelosi tried to do it in her bill. Some of that stuff was taken out, where she tried to extend the reach of bureaucracies that we don't need. And it's really interesting. First, the logic of it is so crazy. This logic that what you do in emergency, you should do all the time. So, if you're lying in bed with a ventilator on, you should lie in a bed with a ventilator on all the time. If you're huddling in if you're not going to work and you're huddling in your house, you should do that all the time. If you're not working, you should not work all the time. It's nonsense. It's a crazy thing to think about. But the other thing about it is the wealth that we have, the materiel that we have, the efficiency that we have that can come to the fore in a crisis was all created by capitalism. It's all created by the free market. And in the places where they have national health, like Britain, they are really, really suffering. They're already practicing triage. They're already letting elderly people go to die, which is ultimately what national health does. If in every problem I feel that we have with our health system, if you want to call it a system, has been caused by government. If we would just let the free market take over and let people price things out and let them go to the doctor they want, let them choose their insurance from around the country and not have to buy it only in their state, if they would just free up the market of healthcare, I think we would do so much better in these crises. There's so much that has come up in this that I would really like to see reformed. Another thing that's happening, talking about Donald Trump being right about stuff. I mean, you have to say, whatever mistakes, I'm sure the administration has made mistakes, and certainly the testing was slow coming out of the gate. And but whatever mistakes they've made, Trump has been right about borders. He's been right about the Chinese supply chain, and he's been right about globalism. All of those things fed into this crisis, and all of those things he was working on before the crisis struck. And now
when
we
he had
see
Diamond
Canada.
and Silk there about a few weeks ago, he's like, eventually we'll wake up, it'll be gone. I mean, that was, I don't know if he's trying to be funny or, but things have changed. Every day things change.
The thing about it is he's right. He's right about that. Eventually, we will wake up and it will be gone. But he didn't hit the right tone. Trump has a big problem with his mouth. He's always had the big problem with his mouth. One of the things that I've seen about him is that he usually ends up doing the right thing, but frequently when things first get started, he talks without editing himself. And he says things, and then the press never lets them go. I mean, think of the difference. Think of the difference here. Donald Trump changes his mind and gets with the program as he gets more information. Has Bernie Sanders ever done that? Has he ever changed his mind? He hasn't changed his mind since 1932, basically. And then on the other side, you have Joe Biden. Every time I see that guy on camera, I think, wow, he could be handling this crisis, and then we'd really be unhappy because he'd just be staring vaguely into the camera. But, of course, you're right, Amy. I mean, Trump has got a mouth. I think even I've talked to some of his deepest supporters, his most ardent supporters, but the minute you mention this, they all roll their eyes and say, "Yes, I wish he would stop.
Of course,
I wish he would control his voice a little bit."
Of course, I mean, it's look, I'm in the same camp. It's like everybody outside the Trump family, I think, is in that camp. But you take the good with the not so good. I mean, nobody is going. Jesus Christ is not going to be president of the United States. So you have to build in the character flaws or the things that are the idiosyncratic things you don't like about the president, and stop lamenting them all the time because that's just part of what you got. So. It's sort of the complaining about the wetness of water. This is who this guy is. This is the price you have to pay for the other things, like what you were just mentioning, we're being right about uncontrolled migration and globalization and the Chinese supply chain. And you also importantly pointed out, and he's been nice to the Jews, so they'll share the vaccine when they make it. Always be nice to the Jews.
Always be nice to the Jews.
Such a great advice. Yes.
That's a golden rule. It's no question about it.
I love it. I love it.
So, Andrew, what is life like for you right now? And
Well,
what have you done to prepare?
It's a kind of a funny thing. I'm a writer. I've spent most of my life in isolation. I've spent most of my life with very little human contact, and only in this later part of my life, as I became a podcaster and got out and started working for the Daily Wire, did I really ever have a public life at all. I know, it's not something that writers usually want. Writers usually want to stand in their room and then sort of open the door crack and push the manuscript out and then close the door again. so I'm very comfortable with this situation, but it saddens me to see the economy taking such a hit. I know people are suffering. I know that this is going to last for a while. And what I'm sort of hoping they'll do is I'm hoping that they'll move over into more of an idea where older people and sick people will self-quarantine and everybody else will get back to work with the tests in place. I think that that's kind of the model we're going to have to go for, because we can't just shut down the economy forever. That has its own costs. That has its own costs in human life and human misery. So that's where I really feel for people, and I certainly feel for anybody who is not as comfortable with being alone as I am. But for me, it's kind of just ordinary life in a way. I love being locked in a room with my computer and just working, and that's what I've been doing.
God, I wish I could be more like you.
Yeah, no, I'm with
it's
you.
It's a weird
like
character.
Day 2 without the gym, I'm dying.
Yeah, Andrew, you and me were like Steve Martin and Charles Grodin in The Lonely Guy. I mean, really, it's like we're living parallel lives. So Steve Mnuchin was just on with Maria Bartiromo saying the White House will send $1,000 checks to all Americans within 3 weeks. As a free marketeer and somebody who knows a little bit about how not stimulative that is, what do you think about a measure like that? Even and before I let you answer, the whole don't give $1,000 checks to people like me who don't need it, not living paycheck to paycheck. Give mine to somebody else. Well, you know what? It's complicated. They're trying. If you like this idea, they're trying to get money out into people's hands. So if you're like me or Andrew,
if you make $1 million, you don't qualify.
Who don't need $1,000, then just turn it over to somebody who does. Private action too. You don't need the federal government to do everything for you. But anyway, Andrew, go ahead on the policy.
Yeah, I think the policy right now seems very scattershot to me. The idea of stimulus is not a very good idea when the economy is shut down. What are you stimulating? I think that what we could use guaranteed loans for small businesses that they will pay back later. That would be really important. I think you want to keep as many businesses going so that when we gear up again, they're still there and people still have their jobs. I think obviously people who need immediate relief has to be available. But I wish that, the government is such a blunt instrument. I mean, this is the problem with government. This is what Karl Marx got wrong from the very start, and guys like Trotsky who said, once the government takes over, how creative will business be able to be? Well, of course, it's exactly the opposite. It's basically 5 guys and girls competing with each other who create the creativity and the productivity. So that's where we want to get back to as fast as humanly possible. We want to get everything up and running as fast as humanly possible. And in the meantime, you just have to give relief where it's needed and give it in a way where it's not going to be just a bailout like we did in 2008, but it's going to create responsibilities for the government. Because you heard Bernie Sanders the other day was saying any business that gets bailed out should then belong to the government, essentially. He thought this was going to be his moment. Communism has come at last. And I think we want the opposite of that. We want to be able to get back to normal as quickly as possible in the aftermath.
He is Andrew Klavan. Check out his podcast, Another Kingdom. Season 3 just concluded. Available. Screenwriter of the movie Gosnell, The Trial of America's Biggest Serial Killer, and famed Hollywood screenwriter and novelist like True Crime, for example. Andrew Klavan, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Always great talking to you. Thanks.
Take care.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download